Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt of all kinds. Wealth and income inequality runs rampant across America, and the middle class is all but disappeared. So what is Extraordinary America about? Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and descendants of immigrants awakening and unleashing the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through entrepreneurship and investing on the light side. It is about financial education, not only when it comes to money in the monetary systems, but also in regards to how to start a business, investing, especially when it comes to precious metals and real estate. In this podcast, I interview guests, many of whom came from humble beginnings, to see how they did it and how they attained financial freedom in their own lives and how they did business. And it is my hope that you will be inspired and you will want to awaken extraordinary within yourselves and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Dr. Dave, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
Dr. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to do this show with me. I'm really glad you're here. So could you tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
Well, yeah, I grew up in the United States. I was born here in the Midwest, and grew up as pretty much uh, someone that was actually brought up to look for a job, work hard, and save money. So that's how I got started. And I actually pursued the kind of things that I was interested in, which was at the time science and technology, which is strange because I ended up going to school and graduating in physics, which is totally different than what I do today. But what really kind of influenced me more toward people was I knew I wasn't going to be a physicist. I got a job as an engineer, if you can believe that, in a factory. But the average age in the factory was 55, and I was a young 21-year-old. And what I realized is these people had a lot more experience than I had. Even though I had some technical education, it wasn't going to go very far with them. I mean, they were older than my parents for the most part. And so what I decided, it was a conscious decision, was the way I would support them was really go out and ask them what they're trying to accomplish and then figure out how I could help them do that. And I think that got me onto the whole path I got onto, is really helping people be successful in larger businesses working together. I learned a lot in that basic process because I had no other choice. There was no other choice because they weren't going to respect me. They get a new engineer every couple of years, some kid that they chew up and spit out. They have to train them. So I became their kid, if you would. And then how can I be of service to you? So that's how I got started in this.
Dr. Dave, that is amazing. And it's really, so one of the things I wanted to ask you was what was like your strategic vision from the time you were an engineer, like, and trying to be a physicist to where you're now helping companies and also like overcoming your weight challenge? Because it's a very interesting journey, how you went from there to where you are now. And if you could just tell the audience a little bit more about that.
Well, I find that an interesting question. In fact, I see a lot of people nowadays trying to do a strategic vision for their life. I didn't have one. I mean, I had things I pursued that I loved, or that in some cases, like I don't know about you, but early on, frankly, I had a student loan and I needed to get a job. So it was not very strategic. But over the so what I find is I think life kind of molds us and presents opportunities that we can say yes and no to. And sometimes it's not so much a strategy as much as kind of following your heart and following what occurs. And I wasn't even smart enough to do that. I don't know if it was smart or not, but I had a series of people along the way that helped me look at my life differently. You know, I didn't even, the first one was when I was an engineer, was my engineering manager. And he came up to me one day and he said, you know, I think you're at a career decision point. And that shocked me because I wasn't even thinking about my career. I said, well, how are you seeing it? He said, well, he said, if you keep along this path, I can predict exactly the money you'll be making and exactly what you're going to be doing. And now again, later on, this is one of my favorite leaders because he was watching out for me when I wasn't even watching out for myself. And I said, well, he said, but you'd probably want, you know, there's probably something different you could do that would be more challenging and more interesting to you. And I couldn't imagine what it was. So I said, what do you think that is? He said, well, like maybe marketing. I had never considered it, but this person actually gave me this gift to start to consider something bigger. I wouldn't say it was strategic. It was strategic in his thinking, but I hadn't gotten to that strategy level yet. And that literally happened to me, has happened to me 2 to 4 times in my life where somebody has helped me change my trajectory into something that that I would even enjoy more. So I would say more. I was given a. I feel very grateful for the presence of different people in my life that have helped me look at those things.
Wow, Dr. Dave, like, yeah, we all need people like that in our life where like you have these transition points and then they change the arc of our destiny by just giving us
Yeah.
advice or being there at the right time. Like a lot of people, like they wish they had like friends or like mentors like that could actually do that. Because we know like whether it's an entrepreneurship or business, like mentorship and like basically motivation is such an important factor, you know? Which brings me to the next question, Dr. Dave. Like when it came to like your weight challenge, because I know you had like you had like issues with like your weight. Like how did you manage to overcome that? Because I feel like the audience can glean some insights into how to get through dark times by through your story, you know?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things was, well, you know, you read it all out, all of the detail on it. It wasn't the heart attack that did it. It was actually, you know, they give you drugs to help you heal afterwards. And those drugs start putting limitations on what I could do. You know, I was used to riding my bike and I had a beta blocker that kept my heart rate down. Well, I could only ride so fast because it wouldn't let my heart go fast enough to put out more power. And I didn't like it. So what I did was, I think the one thing I did is because I wanted to change that, because I wanted to do it in cooperation with the doctors that were treating me, not just do my own thing, because I think doing my own thing was the thing that got me to be so overweight. You know, I thought I knew what to do and and to be honest, I was in denial about my weight. I didn't even know that because there's nothing wrong. So it kind of woke me up and I just decided, you know, the first step was I committed to doing what I needed to do to get a healthy body and to get into more of a right-sized body for my size. And honestly, I thought I had ideas to know what to do, but I really didn't know how I was going to make it from my intention to my actual goal, you know, to actually get there. But I think the first part for me was making that commitment to do it. And then the second next step, and I remember this really clearly, and talk about people helping. I have a sister um, that was listening to me, and at one point, you know, I'm telling her I'm working on this, and I'm kind of the weight's coming down a little bit, and I'm going up and down, and it's not really super. I knew this wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go, but I was making some progress on my own.
Mhm.
And she said 3 words to me. She said, "Stay the course." And normally, what stays the course means to me is keep doing what you're doing. But somehow, the way she said it, I took it completely differently. It was stay the course in the result I wanted to get to. Like stick to it and stick to it until I get the result. And all of a sudden I realized to do that, I would have to be willing to change what I thought I needed to do to keep in a discovery mode to see what would do it for me. And I think those two things were huge because then what I had to do is say, okay, what I'm not doing, what I think I know isn't really working. So let me find other people that can help, other people that have done this other ways, and let me try that. And through that process of discovery and willingness to change my thinking, I had to let go of my thoughts about the right way to do it because the right way wasn't doing it for me. I had to find a new way and to stay the course, like stay at it until I found a way that worked. I think that was one of the biggest things.
Dr. D, so what I'm seeing is that you have an extraordinary level of willpower. Because, like, from if there are many people, like, if they went through what you're going through, they would not be able to recover from that. But, like, my question to you is, like, the willpower requires a why or a motivating factor, like, which helps you to go through, like, the toughest moments and, like, go through adversities and setbacks. So my question to you is, what was your why during those times? Like, kept you moving forward even though things look bleak?
Well, my why was I really, there were a lot of things I wanted to do still. I I was getting stagnant. I was not able to ride my bicycle the way I was before. I was getting aches and pains. I've certainly got a heart attack from this. And so it was like it was so I could do what I wanted to do better, easier, more often, all of that. That was my why. It was really getting a picture of remembering back, what was it like when I could do all of these things and taking those limitations off and saying, that's what I want to get to. And thank you for saying I had a lot of willpower. Actually, it 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 wasn't willpower that got me through this. It was just the consistency of holding to it. It was starting to trust myself that I would be able to find it. Um, in a way, in the end, I found a way that took no willpower. It was just a systematic approach that if you followed the system, willpower wasn't a part of it because what they would say is you've got about 15 minutes of willpower at any one time. So you have to create a system that becomes automatic. I think they called it automaticity, so that you don't even think about it anymore. You just follow the system. And I was able to discover somebody that had created a system like that and follow it and the result. And the most interesting thing was losing the weight was the easiest part of it.
Wow.
Keeping it off was the challenge because and I would say that in business today too, it's the same thing. To get to a goal is easy. To be able to sustain success and build on it's tough, not to have the ups and downs. And so what happens in terms of diet, when you're losing weight is you get all of these rewards. Like you get to stand on the scale and you get to see it go down. You get to, your pants are falling off because they're getting loose. I mean, there's bad news about it too. You have to buy new clothes. And if you don't have the money, it's a lot of money to get new clothes. So, but all this stuff is happening. I think they call it like dopamine hits in your mind. It's just, there's a lot of reward for it. But when you get to the weight you want to get at, nothing's happening anymore. You go to the scale, it says the same thing every day. Your clothes aren't changing. You get the good news is you get to wear the same ones, but they're the same ones. So then the challenge is two things happened to me. One is um, I needed to find something different to focus on than the food now so that wouldn't become my attention. I needed to find a new thing to go after. So what was that? What was I doing? And to do that, I needed to take any judgments I had about what I could and couldn't do out of and just say, what do I want to do? And I don't know, some people that's easy. For me, it was hard to just say, here's what I want. So that was the biggest challenge. And then put my attention to that rather than the food. And then the second thing that was hard was as soon as I got to the weight that I was going to get at, everything that may have caused me to eat off track and to gain weight started to come up, almost like voices in my head. Well, let's go eat that. well, now we're free. We can go back to the old way that we're doing it.
Mhm.
And now I had to deal with those things, and I literally had to transform and heal those parts of me so I wouldn't go backwards. So the real challenge started when I hit the weight. Getting there was not hard. Ultimately, when I found this way, it took me 5 months to find the way to do it. And then it took me 5 months to drop about, 60 pounds, which is pretty fast, or 50 some. But it was 65 altogether. But it was what to do to stay there. And there were tons of clues that I picked up. It took me a year and a half to pick up to learn how to do that and learn from other people. I mean, the first one was I lost the weight doing it on my own.
Mm.
The first thing is you can't maintain weight loss on your own. It takes a community, it takes a support system, or I can't anyway. Maybe some people can. But until I created that support system, I wasn't going to lock it in at that. Um, I needed to do what I call recovery plans. Like if I ever did get off track, I need to catch that early so it doesn't become the old habit, because it's like you've got these habits, and once you trigger the old habits, they just become like, it's almost like being addicted to something. It's so easy to go back to it. So as soon as I would get off, I'd have to have ways to catch it fast, and I would have people around me that would help me with that. So all of these things, that's where the work was. Not getting there, but making it, identifying with my new body was the challenge. Because I'll tell you, it was a year later, I'm riding my bike. I'm literally as skinny as anybody out there riding a bike. And a guy rides by me that looks real fit and skinny. And in my head, what I say is, boy, I'd like to look like him.
Wow.
So you get my picture, even after a year, still wasn't, I was as skinny as this guy, and I was in as good a shape as he was. I was still holding the old picture of myself. Even though I could look in the mirror, I could look at photos, but still I hadn't, what do you call it? I hadn't adapted to the new me. I hadn't identified with the new me. So that was the next challenge. How do I identify with somebody that was thin? Um, I didn't have that picture of myself. I still looked at myself as heavy.
Wow.
So there's just all of those things that I mean, that's where the real work is. Luckily, I was with a group of people that knew how to do this, that had done that journey, that said you don't do it alone. And when I did it alone, I gained about 22 pounds back. And then I woke up one day and realized I better listen to these people. I better start getting people around me that can help me. And then it just right back down again. And now I could maintain it, but there were a lot of those things in place. Another thing, well, I can pause if you've got other questions, but one
No,
other
no, no,
thing
keep
that was
going.
really key to this was to have a recovery plan, to really have some plans. Like, I literally wrote down and identified what are the things that get me off track. And stress would be one of them, because I was a stress eater. Another one was this unconscious thing. I would see me, I would be at the refrigerator with the door open in my hand, not knowing how I got there. So now when I realize I'm there, what's my recovery plan? What am I going to do differently? And I had one. I wrote one out. When I realize that I'm at the refrigerator with the door open, what I'm going to do is just simply look at my next meal and say, is it time to prepare my next meal? Oh, yes. I'll just prepare the next meal and put it back in there. And by the time I did that, I wasn't hungry anymore. So then I could shut the door and leave. I had all sorts of little, just little support systems for myself to get over those ingrained reactions, almost unconscious reactions that I had, so I could transform who I was into, and my whole image of myself is different. So eventually wouldn't get there. Now, if I go back to those things, it'll re-trigger them. But as long as I don't go back, I don't think about food between meals anymore.
So, Dr. Dave, one of the most fascinating things that I got from this was the changing of identity, right? And
Mhm.
also the support system. Like those are two things, right? You need to have a support system around you to help you because your environment is really powerful. If you have the right environment, then you're going to succeed faster and you're going to transform and self-improve faster. But the other thing that I found fascinating, and this is something that also like I grapple with, right, is the changing of identity. There's
Mhm.
like this imposter syndrome we have, like when we're transforming ourselves, and this applies to business as well. Like when you're starting new, when you're a new entrepreneur and you're starting to become a new,
Oh
like
yeah.
you're new to business, you have this old identity as an employee or like as somebody that does the 9 to 5 job, and now you're starting your own business. And it applies to not just business, it applies to every other aspect of life. You start doing this transformation and you go back going to this new identity, this new version of you, right? And then you have this tendency, your subconscious mind has a tendency to regress back. And my question to you, Dr. Dave, is how do you fight that? Because that is the, if we can solve this problem, we can do that for anything. Because that's what like most of us
Yeah.
want to deal with. Like, how do we become this new person and get rid of the old habits, the old you? It's almost like a shedding, but it's so difficult to do. It's like it's kind of irrational almost, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it is. And well, let me be upfront here because I can really relate to this because I would say my whole life I have had an employee mentality versus an entrepreneur mentality. And that's been my role too. And it was only 2.5 months ago that now I'm doing my own business. So I'm new at this, but I know exactly what you're talking about because the very first thing is, and so I can only tell you what I've experienced so far. I don't know the answer, but here was my experience. When I started working on my own. Now, for when whoever's watching this right now, it's kind of like middle, late March, and I only started this January 1st, and I only knew I was starting it 2 weeks before that because the person I had trained me in this and I'd worked for 35 years decided he was going to restructure the company, and he said, "I'd rather not have employees. Would you be willing to do your own company? We'll still partner together." I said, "Sure." Sounded good to me until it happened. And then all the imposter syndrome showed up. Now, let me give you how ridiculous this image is. Because we'd worked together, I literally had around the first part of January, we had contracts that would actually double the amount of take home pay that I would make this year from last year. So in this first quarter, those are contracts are already signed. I'm already doing them. There's already money coming in. It happened that my previous boss was you could say the person that the clients first came to, and then we did a contract together with them. And so let's just say that was about $400,000 of business for the two of us. And of that 400,000, my contribution of that I did on my own was only $10,000 of that 400. So now there's two ways to look at this thing. And the first way I looked at it was through the imposter syndrome eyes, which was, man, can I do this? I've only contributed 10,000. I'm getting the benefit of all this other stuff, like half of the other stuff, but I've only contributed 10. I can't, this is impossible. This is nuts that I'm doing this. That's one way I could look at it. The other way I can look at it is, man, I'm doing better than I've ever done at this. And all it was a viewpoint. I've already got twice the amount of money I know I'm going to make this year than last year. Last year was a low year, but I've got twice as much money. It's already lined up in the first quarter. I am so I remember I was talking to a CEO on the phone that I had coached before, and he said, "How are things going?" And I almost said, "Well, I'm struggling because I'm on my own." But then I said, then I just chose to say, they're going great. And that was true because I said, right in this first quarter, in these first 2 months, I've got enough business captured to more than double what I did last year. Both are true. Which one am I going to choose? It's simply, I think the key is we have to focus. I have to focus on what the success is without making up a negative story in the future that could or couldn't be true. Like, what was my fear? My fear was unless I was in combination with the person I worked for before, could I stand on my own? Well, the reality was that person wanted me involved in this business, and part of selling it was selling both of us, not just him. So, can I accept that part? Not make it up, not do something that isn't true, but can I accept what is true and focus and communicate that focus versus focusing on the lack part or the fear of the future? I think I think that's what happens is in when I do imposter syndrome is I'm not in the present. I'm future focusing on fear.
Wow.
But if I stay in the present and just say what's real and what's positive about the present, I don't know if I can do this 4 years from now or whatever. But if I just stay here today, it's like, hey, there are good things going. I'm adding value to the person that I'm adding value to. Let me just stick with that. And rather than future fantasize negatively. To me, I constantly have to grab myself and identify with where I am successful versus identify with a fear that hasn't happened yet. That to me, that's what I'm facing right now. I have to do that every day. It's not like I've decided and I've got it. It's like I'll turn the corner tomorrow and I'll be facing my fear again. And now what do I do? What the question is when I face my fear, what's my choice? Do I choose to stay in the fear or do I start focusing on what I can contribute, what I am doing that's working, and what I'm planning to do next?
Dr. Dave, that's what it all comes down to, right? How can we face our fears? And a lot of times, a lot of things that we project into the future and we think about regarding the past are irrelevant to the present. It's like
Mhm.
our present moment where we are in the present moment and our focus is on the positive things and then we help expand upon that. That becomes our new reality. And then the other thing that you mentioned about which lens are we looking at the world through, because like we can look at it through a positive lens or a negative lens, right? And there's like different colors of lenses altogether, and which glass we're looking through like determines our reality, and it also determines our future to a large extent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that I found very interesting, like in what you're saying, you know.
But I think there's one thing that I think I've learned over time is that just doing positive thinking or positive affirmations isn't going to get you out of the imposter, isn't going to get me out of the imposter syndrome. It's actually taking positive action when I see a hole in things that is. I mean, that happened to me just last night. Because I've always been working for a company, I haven't hired people like accountants and out of my dime, out of my money. So I'm starting this business. I hired an accountant. Well, the accountant dropped me. I mean, he just got me set up. I don't know half of the stuff. I've handed it over to him. This is great. This is what I want to do. I want to delegate, right? And he drops me. And now I'm in fear, right? It's like, I'm not in real fear. I'm not in a big problem, but it's like, I don't know how to find an accountant. I picked this one because I trusted them and I'd worked with them a little bit before, but now I don't have. I see how I go into this negative thing. How do I find them? How do I decide this is going to be a problem? And all those thoughts. And I settled myself down somehow. Well, actually, a part of me started talking to me, going, you're screwing this up, just to help out. I don't know if you have voices inside that happen at times, but I
Yeah.
do. And so I stopped and I listened. I said, okay, so I'm feeling that way. Let's talk about it. So all of a sudden I got to this point where, oh yeah, I have to trust myself a little bit more. And I just challenged that negative voice a little bit. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, wait, I actually do know 5 people I could call today that would have connections to these people. So I didn't call them. I got on an email last night, and even last night they were responding with suggestions of who I could connect with. And so just that small move of slowing down the negative voice there, the imposter voice, taking a trusting that if I slowed down and thought about it, I'd come up with at least the next step. Sure enough, it appeared, and now I just take it without fear. And there's other steps. I was like, okay, well, when I get them, how do I find? I don't know that yet. First, I have to let me just do the first thing, and then sure, I know people that I can ask how to interview a. So as long as I'm not having to think I have to do it all by myself, I've got tons of help, and it makes the whole thing easier.
Yeah. No, I mean that completely makes sense because as we were going back, like community and like having people around you, like so a lot of people that are starting new businesses or like they're going through a self-transformation, they actually try to do it by themselves. And
Mhm.
then they are surrounded by people that are not supportive, like like close friends or family. Because one of the greatest things, like, and I mentioned this in like previous episodes in my podcast, right? Is you like when we're trying to do a change and we're trying to go like it's not just our old identity that we have to fight against. It's like the people that we hung out with in our old identity, because we tend to attract the people that we're in the same wavelength with. So it's not
Yeah.
just us, it's like the other people as well. And that's one of the greatest revelations I had when it came to self-transformation. You actually have to get a new set of people around you. You gotta go into a new environment, and those are ironically the hardest things to do in the beginning. And also, like even when you did it, like the regression time as well. Like you have to have that. But well, I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I totally agree. Well, it's even tougher when you can't get rid of the people. Like one of the people that was a non-supporter was my wife when I was doing the weight loss. Now,
Oh,
understand, she's a very supportive person. She's a very positive person, but number one, she'd see me fail at this for decades. Say I'd do something and not do it. So she kind of wanted to protect me from another failure. So even when I set what my goal weights were, ranges were, she said, "Well, that sounds too high." She wouldn't be for that. Uh, Wanting to protect me. The other thing was, I asked her one time. I said, "Would you mind if for 30 days we just took all the food that I shouldn't be eating out of the house?" And she said, "Yes, I would. We're not going to do that." So I really couldn't depend on her to support my way of eating. So then I'm faced with the dilemma you're talking about, but I couldn't get rid of the person. And she had been the primary cook in our household. So what I decided to do is I was going to quote unquote stay the course, like my sister suggested. I decided I don't care what she's doing. I can't control her. I can't take the food away from me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do my own shopping and my own cooking, and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do this. And I'm not going to eat with her if she's not eating at the time I'm eating. And it was a little painful in a way because it didn't create a real separation, but certainly it created a physical separation because we weren't eating the same things. She wasn't cooking anymore. Um, I was having to cook myself to get it done right and get the portions right and stuff like that. And it took 2 years until she even volunteered to cook a little food for me. So I think it does take that. At times, I had to sacrifice what I was used to and and where my relationship was with her to really go for this. Now, she's probably said one of the sweetest things to me about the transformation because she put her arms around me once and she said, "Whoa, I can get my arms all around you. This is great." And then she just said this, which was just the sweetest thing. She said, "This is great. I've got my boyfriend back." And, so it's not like she wasn't supportive. It's just she didn't know how and couldn't play I had to play on my own, and get people around me that would support me that weren't her without blaming her for that. So yeah, I think it takes that. You have to, people that you think should be your biggest supporters either may not be able to be, or they think um, not supporting the extent of your vision is the best way to go to protect you from harm. And I think you do have to go to those people that really get some people around you that can support you, that can give the positive approach and actually can advise you, on what might be more on track for you, that might have, gone down that road before, have done the understand what you're facing, have the empathy for that, but also help you keep on your courage to keep going so that you don't stop just 3 feet from your goal and then regress back. Absolutely. I think you nailed it.
No, I mean, Dr. Dave, like this is basically the crux of Extraordinary America. Like we're trying to figure out like the formula of how to do how to successfully transform, right? From like the 99% to 1%, not just like in business and entrepreneurship, but in anything that you want, like anything that you're passionate about, like whether it's your career, your professional life, your personal life, it's all coming down to transformation. But yeah, like I wanted to ask you, like if you had to, like, let's say somebody had to reach out to you and then ask you, Dr. Dave, I want to transform my life in this one particular area, but like, could you give me like an advice on how to go about like what process should I go about doing that? Like, how do you go about advising such a person? Like whether it's like career wise or just like weight challenge or just anything personally.
Well, I'm actually going to take a lot of this from what you said because I think you really lined it out. I think first it's like finding your why. And you don't have to overdo that, but you said finding your why is the thing that uh gives you that picture of it. And I've also heard some things, and we've had some discussion once before where people say once you find your why, it's getting specific about your picture of what you're actually going after. What does it look like when you get there? And not just what does it look like, but what does it feel like? What will you be doing differently? Um, Somebody said to me, David, what if I just put $100 million in your bank account? What are you going to do now? And I really realized that I wasn't ready for that. I had no, I did know what I would be doing, but it was like, oh man, unless this is going to just go to waste and sit there and I just spend it here and there, there's stuff I would be setting up and doing to actually do that. So it's like really getting into those clothes and what it is and feeling it and getting that sense so that you get more enthusiasm and more clarity about where you're heading, where I'm heading to and that's going to be a key thing for me to do. And then um, then I would say it's the next thing is to really look at what are the biggest challenges that you'll most likely face. I know what they are. People usually know what they are. This is where I've fallen down before. And now how do I set up that recovery plan, and the support system socially around me to help me get through those times? Because there's going to be times where, if I'm doing it alone, it could be I revert back. I give up or or what some people talk about is I take a goal that was here and I reduce it to here and say that's good enough, because I'm not believing in this anymore. And yet this is the thing that really gives me energy. So how do I keep on that keep that energy up? I mean, if there's just a few things to start out, those would be the few, and many of them you mentioned as we've been talking here.
No, yeah, Dr. D, you're right. And the foundation of everything is our why and our motivational factor. Because like it's not easy to transform. I mean, let's just be real. Like going to the imposter syndrome, uh, going to the regression, and everything. You have to have a strong, powerful emotional reason why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't know that, you have to take time to delve into that. And I'm just telling the audience because like that's that's basically the foundation. It's kind of like you're building a building, and then your foundation is like your inner why, like what is your path and your purpose. And that sometimes takes a while to figure out, you know.
Sometimes, yeah.
It requires a lot of self-reflection. It requires a lot of like going within yourself and knowing who you are as a person. But yeah.
And I'd say if somebody was new at doing that, I'd add on to that a little bit. Like if you struggle doing that, don't try and do it all at once. In other words, get the part you can get and start taking action toward it, and that'll open a new vista for you. So if because this happens to me, and I see a lot of, people nowadays, people younger than I am, that just go at things, which, I am just so impressed. How they just you just get out and go after it. But for me, I know I was one of those people that I could see there were a lot of choices to me, and I was literally afraid of picking the wrong choice. So I wouldn't pick. And so if anybody out there is in that realm, then I would just say pick something that seems to be exciting to you and go after it. And then it will tell you, the data will tell you as you start moving toward it, is this what I want or is it not? Well, at least you found out it wasn't that. And then you found out it wasn't that. And pretty soon you start building what it is. And that's another way to do it. But like you said, it's not always an instantaneous thing, and it takes reflection, and it's worth the time.
So, Dr. Dave, the American identity, part of it is about the pursuit of happiness, right? And from our conversation, we understand that a lot of times happiness comes from like transforming ourselves to attain our goals and everything. But from your perspective, how do you think Americans should go about pursuing happiness? And is there like a method to it?
Let's see. That's a big question. And again, I'm always safest just answering it for myself in my experience. And then I'm not saying this is the answer. But over time, what I've gotten to is really one of my whole challenges in my life is to really learn to just be happy with who I am right now and build on that. So a lot of times we put happiness outside in terms of things and what we want to accomplish. And by the way, I'm really for, if you want to accomplish something, even though other people think it's ridiculous or petty or selfish, I wouldn't judge it based on that. If it gives you energy, I'd say go for it, and the heck with what people's opinions are. It's like everybody's got an opinion, just like everybody's got a nose. And like a friend of mine would say, you wouldn't want to live in someone's nose, so don't pay attention to their opinion. Um, so I think it's the type of thing is like, if we can be grateful, if I can be grateful for what I have, and that's pretty much as far as the American dream for me, I just have a lot of gratefulness to whether I took the challenge or not, that there's this possibility that I can take advantage of here in America. And it's all about me being willing to dream and willing then to take a step toward the dream. And regardless of what I do or don't do, can I be happy each day? Can I find some sort of gratefulness and happiness? And yesterday was a bad day for me. A lot of things seemed to go wrong. I ate off my plan. I've said some of them here. I lost my accountant. And they weren't talking to me, and just a whole bunch of things I was complaining about. And I happened this morning to write down, I did a little what's called journaling, where you just write some thoughts on stuff. And I started to realize this other side of it, like, wow, I put out the word and I've got people giving me these ideas about who I can talk to. I I literally found a way to, when I get um, to take, almost feels like taking back my power in eating by by actually, I went over all the behaviors that got me off track. And instead of saying they happened, I said, I chose to do this. I actually wrote it down. I chose to buy frozen cherries at the store because I was choosing to eat them off plan that night. And I just wrote this all down. And by writing it all down, I realized I had a choice all the way along. And if I could choose the things that didn't work for me, I could just as easily choose the things that could work for me. And when I got done with all of that, I talked to my wife this morning. I said, you know how I was feeling yesterday? She said, yeah. She said, I said, now I feel like that's the best day I've had for a long time. And so I think that happiness is something that's present in every moment as long as we're willing to choose it. And in the American dream, it just allows us more of that ability to choose more openly. But even if it wasn't open, you could still choose it inside.
No, I totally agree, Dr. Dave. Like, yeah, that's definitely on a it's very deep and insightful when the way you present it. So uh yeah, we have to do it that way. But Dr. Dave, is there any projects that you're doing right now that you'd want me and the audience to get a glimpse into?
Well, there's a couple of them. One of the things I'm working on is to be an expert in to just use my expertise and expand it in and doing passive income growth. And that's another thing. When I started that, I said, "Oh, I don't do it. I don't know how to do it." And I realized I already had one, but I never acknowledged it. So it's building on that. That's part of my focus moving forward. Also, I've done a lot of work with mid and large size companies. My expertise is really in creating culture change in weeks rather than years. So really behavioral change in large organizations. But another project I'm working on is how can I make that easy for new technical managers? Because I came from the technical to the people side to be good people leaders in a rapid amount of time in a more of a do-it-yourself app type way. But that includes getting the outside support. But they don't, they can start because I wanted to do it by myself at first. So how can I get a process for a technical leader to become technical manager to become a good tech people leader right from the start, right from the first time they take that role or they're thinking about it. So those are my two new things that are going on.
That is awesome, Dr. Dave. And Dr. Dave, how can our audience connect with you and get to know more of what you more about your work and what you're doing and all of that?
I think the easiest way is there's two ways. Go to my website that kind of gives you an overview of me at Dr. Dave Rodgers, and you can see the name. I think if it's on here, it's rodgers.com or Dr. Dave Rodgers at gmail.com. You can reach me either of those two ways.
Okay, Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave, I appreciate and I'm really thankful that you took the time to do this podcast with me because your entire idea of like transformation and self-improvement and going from one identity to the other is so relevant for most of us today. Like, because that is what we're all struggling with is how do we get to that new version of ourselves? And then you've already been in the trenches doing that, and I really appreciate the insight that you gave us today. And I would hope that you come back at a later time to do the show with me because I would really appreciate that.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I really appreciate the opportunity to hear some of what you have to say, and also just the opportunity, the questions, just for me to explore them because I haven't thought about some of these things for a while, and it's nice to say, well, what is it for me? Because I can take it away too. So thank
No,
you.
no, I mean like self-transformation is ultimately that's what we're all headed to. Like it's all we are always transforming, but like to do it in an efficient and systematic way, like that's the real question. How do we do it in a way that's like the fastest and having a community of people supporting you and then having a system and having that will to do it. That's like the thing. And I really appreciate that you shared the insight with us today. And I want to conclude this episode by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us, and it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Exploring America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets us free. Also, remember that inflation is diluting your purchasing power, which in turn increases financial bondage. The practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power and invest in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Lastly, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.